Hong Kong International Airport Ghost Story. This story takes place in a place that most people wouldn't associate with supernatural events. Yet, many strange occurrences have been reported there. This place is none other than Hong Kong International Airport, a hub for travelers worldwide. Typically, airport restrooms are color-coded to distinguish between male and female facilities, blue for men and red for women, as is the international standard. However, at Hong Kong International Airport, both men's and women's restrooms are marked with blue signs. This wasn't always the case. Initially, the women's restrooms were marked with red signs. The change happened because of the following story. One night, a flight attendant was preparing for a post-midnight flight. Around 11 p.m., she arrived at the airport and decided to use the public restroom outside the restricted area. As she approached, she noticed a boy dressed in red standing outside the women's restroom, seemingly waiting for someone. This wasn't unusual, as children often wait for their parents. The flight attendant paid little attention to the boy and went about her business. However, when she exited the restroom, the boy was still there. She took a closer look and noticed he looked unusually pale, almost sickly. Concerned, she approached him and asked, "What are you doing here?" The boy replied, "I'm waiting for my mom. She's been inside for a long time." The flight attendant offered to check on his mother. She entered the restroom and politely called out to see if any woman was looking for her child. There was no response. Curious, she checked each stall, finding them all empty. When she turned around, she saw a woman in red standing in the mirror. The sight startled her because she hadn't seen or heard anyone enter. She brushed off the initial shock, thinking she might have missed seeing the woman earlier. But as she looked closer, she noticed something chilling. The woman had no feet. Frightened, the flight attendant backed into a wall, making a noise that caused the woman to slowly turn around. As she did, the restroom lights dimmed, casting an eerie shadow over the room. The woman smiled at the flight attendant before slowly floating out of the restroom. Terrified, the flight attendant grabbed her bag and ran out. She noticed the boy and the woman had vanished. Shaken, she returned to work and shared her story with her colleagues. The tale spread quickly among the airport staff, reaching the management. The airport executives decided to review the security footage. What they saw confirmed the flight attendant's account. The video showed the flight attendant talking to a boy and then encountering a semi-transparent woman in red. The woman and boy eventually floated away and disappeared. Shocked by the footage, the management decided to change all the women's restroom signs from red to blue. They hoped this would prevent any confusion for the ghostly child, who might mistake the red sign for his mother. Although the color change seemed to work, stopping further sightings of the boy in red outside the women's restrooms, the legend of the ghostly mother and child at Hong Kong International Airport was just beginning. Alright, this next story is about the same red-clad ghostly mother and child. There was this aircraft technician who, after landing in Hong Kong, was taxiing the plane to its designated parking area. Typically, the ground crew assists pilots during this process. You might have seen in movies where ground crew hold lights and signal the pilot with hand gestures. This helps the pilot navigate since they can't always see everything from up in the cockpit. This particular night, the technician guiding the plane was doing his usual job when suddenly the pilot stopped following his signals. The ground crew found this strange as they had no way to communicate with the pilot directly to understand what was happening. This situation persisted for about 5 to 10 minutes before the pilot finally resumed following the signals and parked the plane properly. When the pilot eventually disembarked, he seemed quite upset. He approached the ground crew angrily and asked why they were so unprofessional. He pointed out that according to protocol, the area should have been cleared of all unauthorized personnel to avoid any distractions or interference. The ground crew was baffled because they had followed all the guidelines to the letter. The pilot then explained, "While I was taxiing, I saw a woman in a red dress and her child standing behind you, waving at me. Next time, make sure the area is clear. This is a restricted zone, and such distractions are unacceptable. If this happens again, I'll file a complaint with the airport authorities." The ground crew was puzzled because they hadn't seen anyone matching that description. The night ended without further incident, but a week later, the pilot tragically died in a car accident. Whether it was related to the ghostly encounter or not, no one could say. Another incident happened at the same airport. After a plane had landed and the pilot had left, a senior ground crew member, whom we'll call Raymond, was tasked with taxiing the plane to the maintenance hangar. Raymond could control the plane on the ground, much like driving a car, even though he wasn't a pilot. One night, as Raymond was taxiing a plane to the hangar, he found it unusually difficult to control. The instrument panel was flickering, and the plane wasn't responding smoothly. Frustrated, he eventually yelled into the empty cabin, "Stop messing around. I need to get my work done." Then, he shut the cabin door, hung a Buddhist prayer necklace on it, and resumed taxiing. To his surprise, things seemed to improve. However, he soon heard a child's voice saying, "I want to play. It's so fun," followed by a woman's voice scolding the child, "Stop it. You're disturbing the worker." Raymond felt a chill, but focused on his job. When he nearly reached the hangar, he heard loud banging on the cockpit door, which was extremely sturdy and reinforced for security. The force was so strong, it seemed as if someone was trying to break it down. Despite his fear, Raymond kept taxiing the plane. As he finally parked it in the hangar, he noticed that his prayer necklace had been shattered by the force of the banging. He quickly gathered the scattered beads and exited the plane through the pilot's passage, eager to leave the eerie experience behind. Some colleagues saw Raymond rush off the plane looking scared and asked what happened. He explained that the ghostly mother and child had returned, banging on the door and causing a commotion. His colleagues, aware of the stories, nodded and hoped that the spirits wouldn't cause more trouble during their shift. They all continued their work, knowing that the airport had its share of supernatural occurrences. All right, let me tell you a spooky tale from the airport security personnel. Our main character here is a security officer named Frank. One night, Frank and his partner were on their usual patrol in their airport security car. They finished their rounds ahead of schedule, so they decided to take a little break. They parked their car in a secluded maintenance area where they wouldn't be easily seen. Frank's partner quickly fell asleep, even snoring softly. But Frank found himself unable to sleep. Something just felt off. He checked his phone to make sure the alarm was set so they wouldn't oversleep, but still, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. As he lay there, Frank suddenly heard the sound of a basketball bouncing outside the car. The sound was unmistakable, like someone playing basketball nearby. Frank raised his seat slightly and looked through the side mirror to see what was going on. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. About 30 feet behind their car, illuminated by the faint light of a nearby lamp, was a young boy dressed in red, bouncing a basketball. Frank instantly knew this wasn't a normal situation. He muttered to himself, hoping the boy would just continue playing and not come closer. But as if the boy had heard his thoughts, he stopped bouncing the ball and looked straight at Frank through the mirror with an eerie grin on his face. Then he started walking towards the car, still bouncing the ball. Frank's heart raced, and he found that he couldn't move, as if he was paralyzed. He wasn't asleep. He knew that for sure, but he just couldn't move. The boy kept getting closer, and Frank struggled to regain control of his body. He began silently reciting prayers, trying to muster all his strength to break free from the paralysis. Finally, just as the boy reached the back of the car, Frank was able to move again. He shot up in his seat, quickly adjusted it, and started the car, driving away as fast as he could without even waking his partner. As they sped off, Frank looked in the rearview mirror and saw the boy chasing them, floating eerily above the ground and keeping pace with the car. Frank pressed the accelerator harder, trying to shake off the ghostly pursuer. His partner woke up, confused, and asked why they were suddenly speeding away. Frank, still panicking, explained that he saw the ghostly boy with the basketball. His partner immediately understood, as this wasn't the first time airport staff had encountered the eerie apparition. Everyone in the maintenance crew knew about the boy in red. Seeing the ghost still chasing them, Frank continued to accelerate until finally the boy could no longer keep up. When Frank was sure they had lost the ghost, he slowed down and drove back to their security post. Once there, Frank turned to his partner and said, "Let's never take a break in that spot again. We don't want to run into that boy ever again." This story takes place the night after Frank's encounter with the ghostly boy bouncing a basketball. Despite the fear he felt, Frank had a fascination with the supernatural and regularly listened to paranormal radio shows during his patrols. After finishing their rounds, Frank and his partner parked their patrol car to take a short break. While they were resting, Frank wondered if he should call into the radio show and share his eerie experience from the previous night. As Frank was considering this, he suddenly heard a child's voice right next to his ear, angrily telling him, "Mind your own business." Frank quickly turned around but saw no one there. He brushed it off, thinking he must have imagined it. But then the child's voice returned, louder and more insistent, saying, "I told you to mind your own business. Stop talking about it." Frank knew he hadn't imagined it this time. Fear gripped him as he decided it was best to leave the area immediately. He started the car and drove back to their security post. Later that night, Frank had another task to attend to. A flight was arriving after midnight, and part of his job was to inspect the plane. He and his partner drove a stair truck to the plane's location. Out of courtesy, they waited for the pilots to disembark before beginning their inspection. Frank quickly finished his checks and started descending the stair truck when he felt a sudden push from behind. He lost his balance and tumbled down the stairs, hitting his head multiple times until he landed unconscious at the bottom. Frank's colleagues rushed over and found him lying there, unconscious and severely injured. They called an ambulance, and Frank was taken to the hospital. After undergoing emergency treatment, he regained consciousness, surrounded by concerned co-workers. One of his colleagues, who had stayed with him at the hospital, recounted the events. "Frank, you were saying the strangest things while you were out. You kept muttering, 'Serves you right. I told you not to talk about it.' Now, let's see if you still want to talk." Hearing this, Frank's heart sank. He immediately thought of the ghostly boy's warning from earlier. Even though he had survived the fall, Frank was left with serious injuries and would need extensive time to recover. Frank ended up with a 2-year medical leave to recuperate at home. When he finally recovered and returned to work, the first thing he did was resign. He vowed never to set foot on the airport tarmac again, hoping to leave behind the terrifying experiences and the malevolent spirit that haunted him. All right, the next story doesn't take place in the airport, but rather on a long-haul flight returning to Hong Kong from abroad. The main character is named Carol, who is a flight attendant. Usually, on long-haul flights, flight attendants have rest periods because the journey can be quite lengthy, often lasting over 10 hours. There's no way a single person can work non-stop for such a long duration. So, the flight attendants have designated rest times. In their workstation area, there's a narrow staircase leading up to a small compartment above the cabin, which serves as their rest area. This space is simple, with a few mattresses and curtains to provide some privacy. On one of these flights, it was Carol's turn to rest. She went up to the rest area, took off her uniform jacket to avoid wrinkling it, and laid down to nap for an hour or two. When her alarm went off, she got up, put her uniform back on, and prepared to return to work. As she was descending the stairs back to the cabin, she noticed an elderly woman sitting on the steps. This puzzled Carol because it was an unusual place for a passenger to be, given that most people don't even know about this area, and it's generally not accessible to passengers. Carol asked the elderly woman, "Ma'am, why are you sitting here?" The woman replied, "I went to the bathroom, and now I can't remember where my seat is. I got scared, so I decided to sit here and wait." Understanding the situation, Carol reassured her, "That's all right. Can you tell me your name? I'll check the passenger list and help you find your seat." The elderly woman provided her name, and Carol checked the passenger list but couldn't find it. She told the woman, "I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the list. Are you traveling alone or with someone?" The woman said, "I'm with my husband." Carol asked for his name, and upon checking the list again, she found the husband's name. She told the woman, "Okay, I found your husband's name. Please wait here, and I'll bring him to you." Carol went to the husband's seat and said, "Sir, are you Mr. Husband's name? Your wife is having trouble finding her seat after using the restroom. Can you come and help her?" The man's expression turned serious, and he said, "Miss, please don't joke about such things." Confused, Carol insisted, "I'm not joking. She's sitting by the service area." The man replied, "My wife is on this flight, but she's not sitting in a passenger seat. She's in the cargo hold." Carol was taken aback. "The cargo hold?" The man explained, "My wife passed away overseas, and her body is being transported back to Hong Kong on this flight for her funeral." Carol was stunned. She quickly apologized and returned to the service area, only to find the elderly woman had vanished. This left her with an eerie feeling, as the image of the woman lingered in her mind throughout the rest of the flight and long after. This incident became a haunting memory in Carol's career as a flight attendant. And that's the end of the story. Some of you might be wondering how a new airport, with no history, could be so haunted. The reasons for this are varied. One explanation is that the airport was built on a site that once had ancient graves, which were relocated without proper rituals. Another is that the area used to be a landing spot for illegal immigrants, many of whom perished in the sea. Lastly, industrial accidents during the airport's construction claimed several lives, adding to the haunted lore. The story of the ghostly mother and child at the airport supposedly originated from a tragic accident involving a construction worker's family. The mother and her child were visiting the father at the construction site when an accident occurred, resulting in their deaths. This incident is said to be the origin of the airport's ghostly sightings. That's it for this story. Thank you all for watching this video. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure to ring the notification bell for future updates.